Welcome to our resin casting video. In this video I'm going to be going through casting your resin, colouring your resin, embedding things in resin and anything else I can think of to talk to you as we go along about resin. Now first of all, there are lots of different types of resins. You can get fiberglass resins, polyester resins and epoxy resins. They're your main ones, which is what we use. You have other things called resin which is different again. We use epoxy resin for our casting because it is one of the safer types of resins to use. Doesn't have ridiculously nasty chemicals in highly concentrated forms, etc. So epoxy resins come in, well, all resins come in two parts, and they form a catalyst. So when you mix the two parts together in the amounts that you are required to do them in, a chemical reaction starts to happen, which then causes it to start to harden. Okay. Most of the time, resins will dry or will actually be clear to start with, but occasionally, depending on the quality of the resin or what the use of the resin is, they can also have a slightly yellowy kind of hues to them. Even within each of those three main types of resins, you still get lots of different formulations of each of them that might be more suitable for different types of things here or there, designed to cure slightly faster, cure slightly slower, etc. When you're mixing resin, I just touched on it briefly then, it's really important that you get the ratio of part one and part two very much correct. There's lots of different ways of doing that. You can have weights and scales and special measurements, syringes, etc. We're quite lucky here in that we've got these pump systems that attach to our bottles that we purchased to make our lives a bit easier. That gives us the exact ratio. Now they do only work though if you use them correctly. So for our West system resins, for this one at least, it's a 5:1 ratio. 5 of parts of our resin to 1 part of the hardener. Okay. What they designed the pumps is so that if you do 1 full pump of each, that will actually give you that ratio. So when 1 full pump of this big bottle here gives me 5 parts epoxy, 1 pump of the hardener gives me 1 part of hardener. Okay. If you do get a little bit confused, there is a little thing on the lid there. It says 1 pump of this and 1 pump of that equals 5:1. And the larger pump and the smaller pump in the correct order as well. Okay, now before I get into mixing that, because I don't want to mix that before I'm ready to actually go on and get everything sorted, I'm going to go through colouring resin. There are several different ways you can colour resin, things that are specifically designed to go in resin, and then things that, you know, if you're super desperate, you can just kind of get away with, provided you don't actually need the resin to be too specific about the kind of qualities you're going to have with it. And first one I'm going to go through are our dyes. These are going to give a transparent colour to it, so you'll be able to see through the other side, but there'll be a tint to it with whatever colour you have. Now you can mix those dyes to create other colours as well. Next one along is our pigments. These are our opaque colours. This is like a thick sludge. These ones, this is quite liquidy, these are more of a thick sludge. And we don't need much of either of those. Basically, you need about 3% of those to however much resin you have, and that will give you the proper colour. Anything more than that, and you start to risk the resin not curing properly. So that's going to give you an opaque colour. We have lots of different colours in that as well, and you can also mix those together to create new colours. Then we have our pigments, our pigment powders, sorry. So all of our little powders. These will be opaques as well, and you can get up to 50% powder into your resins mix, but you really don't need that much at all. Normally we really only use quite a tiny amount, and it comes through quite well. A lot of these are metallic that we have, because that is unique. You can't get metallics in the other ones, but you can get them in powders, so we get those in our powders. Okay, now if you're super desperate, you can use acrylic paints to colour your resin as well, but as I said before, you do run the risk of it not setting properly, and something that I'd probably only do if I was super desperate and really, really needed to do it right then and there. Okay, things that you can include into your resin. You can also mix something like a glitter in. But even if you get super, super fine glitter, it will actually sink unless you mix it in when the resin is already partway cured. Okay, so if you've left the resin for an hour or so, and it's starting to get really kind of thick and sludgy, then you mix your glitter in, there's less likely that it's going to settle as much. It will still settle a bit, okay, but it's not going to be as much. All right, so that's something that you can include in as well. And you can also include in little particles of other things like iron filings or copper filings, or your, what's this called, fake gold leaf. You can mix in as well. And this will break up and float around the place, stick to the sides, etc. It's usually fairly unpredictable how it's going to behave. Alrighty, around me I've got a whole bunch of other things set up as well. Normally you're going to be doing this on some kind of a plastic surface. Our black builder's film that we use for sometimes gluing on over in woodwork is superb for dealing with resin because nothing sticks to that either. So once the resin's dry, you just pops off, throw it in the bin, reuse your black plastic sheet. So normally you're going to have something like that set up, but you're going to be having all of this stuff on before you get too excited about getting anywhere, because resin sucks for cleaning up. Now you can see I've got gloves on. Resin is super sticky and a pain to get off your hands, so whenever I actually remember to, I do put gloves on. But the other side of things is that these actually are still chemicals that aren't good for you. And while they're much safer than they could be, you still don't want to have lots and lots of exposure to this if you don't have to. So gloves on just reduces the amount of it that can get on my skin. And my skin's pretty good, but some people have quite irritated skin or irritable skin, and this can be quite a irritant in those situations. So you just want to try and avoid that as much as possible and have your gloves on. I've got a whole bunch of these cups. That's what I'm going to be using to mix my resin in, and then pour into other ones to mix my colours into, so I don't contaminate everything and keep them all nice and separate. Normally I like to have one of my ice cube trays that I can pour small amounts of resin in to mix my colours in if I don't need large amounts of colours, because normally you don't. And then they're reusable as opposed to these which I have to throw out, but they're currently indisposed, my silicone ice cube tray moulds, so they need a bit of cleaning before I can use them. Around I've got extra stirring devices, so that I've got whatever I might need to hand in the moment, because I really want to make sure that I am prepared, because as soon as that mix happens, it's starting to cure. Now, it's not the warmest day today, it's a warmer day than it's been in a couple of weeks, but it will still start to happen because it generates its own heat as it cures. Okay, it has a thermal reaction as it cures as well. So larger amounts of it together will actually cure and set faster than smaller amounts of it. So I do have to still work relatively quickly to make sure that I'm not going to end up with it going all over the place. Now I'm going to try and show you a bit of everything here today so you can see a bit what's going on. And if I do actually manage to figure out how to add in another video onto the end of this one, then I'll show you what they show you taking them out of the molds and everything else. Or I might just have that as a separate video if I can't figure out how to join it on. Okay, now as far as things that you can put and embed into your molds, you can see I've got 3 different setups here for our molds. Things that I can embed into it, anything I like really, as long as it's dry. It has to be completely dry. If there's any moisture in there, then it will cause the resin to go cloudy, which we really don't want. So if you want to have flowers or something like that you want to embed in your resin, they must be completely dried first. Okay, very, very important. Now, depending on what you're wanting to do with your resin afterwards might also change what you can put in there. So if you're wanting to do some shaping, so cutting it up into pieces and shaping it into some kind of cool design, then you'll also need to consider that you probably don't really want to use things like glass, rocks, ceramic, because they're tricky to drill into and not have things crack and crush, and they're tricky to cut, especially if you don't have a good water supply around for your shaping and stuff as well. You don't really want to breathe in glass or ceramic dust at all. It's quite nasty for you. Other things to consider is that wood items, anything really porous, wood, the feathers will do it on me as well, given half a chance. That kind of stuff will actually float. Other stuff will sink. Things like really small glass beads, I already mentioned the glitter, anything that's got any kind of weight to it will sink, okay? these float because they've got air in them, and there's nothing much I can do about that without some kind of a fancy vacuum press and lots of time. Now I can also end up with a situation where the resin will float over the top of, but then trap air around my items, especially if they're my more porous kind of items. So if I can coat them in a small amount of resin first, then that will actually prevent that from happening. And you'll see them as silver bubbles. I'm going to just leave it so that you will actually hopefully get a chance to see that happening. But they'll look very silvery. It happens a lot on the feathers because it traps a lot of air in between those bits of feathers. So yeah, that's something else to think about and how you're going to manage that. Alrighty, so let's get stuck into it now. I don't know how much resin I'm going to need, but I'm probably going to need a fair bit. So I'm going to do maybe 3 pumps to start with, and because I'm going to keep that container completely separate and I'm not going to mix any colour into that, I can always come past and add in some more if I need to, as long as it hasn't been too long. I've also got a syringe down here because I can use that to draw up the resin and then either put that into my smaller moulds if I don't want to just pour it in, or I can use it to place bits of colour around the place. Alrighty, so with the pumps, one complete depression. I've got to make sure I go all the way down until it doesn't go down any further. Then I need to let it come all the way back up on its own. It's really important I don't try to pull it back up because it will potentially not draw resin in, draw an air bubble or something, and I'll end up with the incorrect amount. So that's the first one, first pump. Second pump. Now I am doing one at a time so it doesn't start to cure in there before I get a chance to mix it. Third pump. Now in colder temperatures, this can actually be really hard to push down, and you may need to put it in some warm water or something like that. I find, generally speaking, I can still manage it, but it's definitely a lot nicer to do in our summer, warmer months. Okay, then this one here, it's got 3 pumps of this one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to give it a good mix. Now I'm trying to mix this as thoroughly as possible without introducing any air bubbles into it. Okay, or as little air bubbles as possible into it. And that does give off a smell. It's not something you're really going to stick your nose over and breathe in, and that's never something you should be doing with chemicals anyway. But it's not too bad, provided that you're not going to be, that's about as much as I want for that, in a really small room with it for long periods of time. So our workshops are usually airy enough to not get too stressed about that. Okay, just keep an eye on the drips from this as you're doing these kind of thing. Those bits are killer. I'm just going to take that out for now actually. Quite a bit more of this one. And then this last one down the back here is actually going to be my powder. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with that one, so I'm just going to start to move that forward so I can get to it. Maybe just a small amount of that one as well. Now with the dyes, if I'm going to be doing something like a dye, I usually want to try and get all of that in the one mixed first off if I can help it. Okay, so a couple of squirts of that. So this is our dye. I'm just going to check that you can see. Yep, that's good. Okay, you can see that mixing in, and I really want to make sure I give that a really good mix through so I don't get streaks going on. You might think, oh, streaks are really cool, but it actually is just meaning that those parts are going to be much more concentrated colour. If you wanted something like streaks, you would actually have 2 different mixtures of resin where one had a lot more dye than the other, and once you've mixed the colours together like that properly into the resin, then you can cause streaks intentionally through what you're doing. Okay, so that's my dye there. You can see how transparent that is. You see my stirring stick in the middle of that. Okay, I was going to try and add a smidge bit of this. Now I know this is not in a good state and have much of it, so I'm going to show you just how little you can actually use sometimes of it to give an impact on colour. Okay. So that's just taken that a little bit. This is actually an aqua colour, so it's not going to affect my yellow as much as a proper blue would. Now, if I end up with things like this that I don't want to reuse, I'm just going to stick them back in, and I definitely can't put this back on my die anymore because it's already got resin over it, okay? So I do need to think about that and consider how I'm going to manage those kinds of things. That's why that black plastic is so useful. Stick it over the black plastic, all good to go. Alrighty, this is my powder, my pigment powder. Okay, I try and leave these on part way a little bit, just prevents it from going out. Now this stuff will stick to everything, okay? It's not that bad, this is non-toxic, this stuff, so it's all good. Really tiny amount there. Put that in, and if I want to add more, I'll use a little bit of a toothpick, okay? The more of this that I add, the more likely it is that it's going to be really, really kind of properly opaque. So you can get a little bit more of a kind of see-through-y look with it. And if you're not careful, you get streaks as well. And you can actually mix some of the pigment powders into things like your dyes or your pigments to give a bit of a metallic-y kind of look to it if you want to. Now, if you do mix two different pigment powders together, two different colours, you don't get, it's not like with paint where you can then make the other colour. Often you just get some kind of like a two-tone finish. Yeah, it doesn't affect the colour as much as everything else does. Now, if I want that to be a bit more solid, then I would need to add a bit more in. But depending on how thick you're going, that could be fine. Okay, I might just add a smidge bit more in though. I'm going to pick some of that up on one of my toothpicks and throw that in. That's giving us a much nicer colour now, look at that. So you can see the difference straight away with that. Much nicer, very, very nice red colour that is. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to put that lid straight back on. Don't want to risk tipping all of that out. Okay, now if I've got resin on my hands at this point, I need to be careful about touching other bits and pieces. Do not want to be putting resin over everything. You end up with containers that look like this, that colour your hands as soon as you open them. Okay, with these ones here, like I said, very sludgy, these ones. Okay, these are also quite old, some of these. Really don't need much at all, okay, to give us a decent colour. And so it's about 3%. Just gonna get that in there, put the lid back on. And then that's gonna just help take that off of the end of that for me. I'm gonna stick that up there. If I need to add extra, I'll just bring that over and start to mix that around. But you see that, starting to create a really nice thick colour, even with just that little tiny bit of pigment. Quite a decent effect going on from all of that. Okay. So that is mixing my colours. Okay. So to start with, I'm probably going to maybe look into this one here a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to use my clear because I want to be able to have some kind of a contrast between my wood and the other colours around to get this, to be able to see that kind of mountain range I've got going on. So I'm going to start by pouring some of this in. Just a little bit, just going to let it kind of find its way around. Now if I do have a hole in my careful hot gluing going on there, then I will not necessarily see it straight away. It sometimes will take a little while to actually find that gap and work its way through, but once it does, it'll just be continuous, it'll just keep coming. Okay, You can actually starting to see on the side there where the resin's starting to soak into the timber, but because it's got the plastic on it, it's not getting there as quickly, which is actually good. Means that they're less likely to float, which I really don't want to have happen. I'm just going to leave it at that for now, because I'm going to put a little bit of glitter on the surface, which I'm hoping is then going to just settle nicely on the tops of all of my, as the time goes on, that will just settle on the tops of the wood and give it a little bit of a shimmer to that. Give that a bit of a stir to break that surface tension. And get that flowing through there. Okay. I was thinking I might add a little bits of this, little drops of this in there. Okay. See what effect I can have with that hopefully coming through. Going to give that a bit of a poke in a minute. Now the syringes can usually get 2 or 3 uses out of each of those syringes. I'm just going to see if I can't encourage that to go a bit deeper. Create a bit of a swirl kind of look going on. So I've got some kind of streaky bits happening of opaque, but I can still see my mountains going on. Alright, that's probably enough messing around with that to get that to do its thing. It'll keep moving, so I don't want to do too much because it will keep moving on its own. And I'm probably going to have to add some more clear in a minute anyway, as it's starting to squeeze some of the air bubbles out of these. I can see the air bubbles escaping up the top on this side here, which is pretty cool. So I'm probably going to have to add just a little bit more of this in, which is also going to affect what I've just done with all of that. Now I'm going to try and have it go just along that edge there to hopefully limit how much that pushes down on that. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to be happy with this one here for now. It's going to keep doing its thing about getting the resin in between all of those bits of wood and squeezing the air out. I can give it a couple of taps, but the more I interfere with it, the more it's going to move things around quite a bit. So I'm just going to put this out of the way and bring my feathers one forwards. Okay, now I've got some yellow here. I don't really want it to be super yellow like that, so I'm just going to mix some more of my clear in with it. Should take some of that tint out, and I'm probably going to need at least another go of some clear, I think, to fill that mould. We'll see how we go for now. So I'm just going to dial that down a little bit. Hopefully that will just complement the gold leaf that I've kind of splattered around the place. And just going to pour this directly in on top of my feathers. Now the feathers will actually float up to the surface again and flatten themselves back out, and I can play around with them with my my pop sticks and things anyway to do that. But I just don't want to move them too much because I don't want to lose some of that kind of fluffiness that they have. Okay, but I'm starting to get some air bubbles underneath them. I'll see if I can get the camera around it to show you what they look like in a minute. It's actually not bad, so it might just be a little bit of clear. One more pump of clear for the let's move you forwards so I can keep that with that so I know which colour's which. Okay, so let's just see if I can get you closer, because you're not going to be able to see it from there. Hopefully I get it back in the same spot. You should be able to see, especially on that blue one and underneath the top left pink one there. Let's see if we can focus. No, maybe not. But you've got this kind of silvery look going on. Okay, those are actually air bubbles. Okay, so you can see that I'm messing with that air bubble now, and it's changing how that air bubble is looking. So I can get that air bubble out, and that's now gone away. And I'll need to do the same on this one here. And possibly any other ones where there might be a bit of air bubble underneath it. Like I said, I don't want to mess around with it too much because I want my feathers to stay nice and fluffy looking within the resin. I don't want them to look all ragged and wet. So feathers do have really cool effects that you get out of putting them in resin, but they just kind of are a bit of a pain to get the air bubbles from out of. So I'm just going to put that there for now. I'm trying to put you back up here in the same spot that we were in before so you can see what's going on. You'll also see there was a little bit of gold leaf that I've already put in this one here. Okay, and I'm going to try and maybe give a few streaks of this colour across it as well. I'm not really sure how well that's going to turn out. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do some of this because it should kind of give some kind of spreading out dots that I can streak through the place. Kind of create a little bit of interest in some of those spaces that don't have much of the feathers going on around them. See if that works. Not sure how good that will turn out. But can't find out unless I try it. I'm going to use that mostly with beads. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now I probably will find that because my feathers will float, once this is mostly cured, another little coat of clear on top will actually just help create a nice flat surface going on with that one. Okay, so I need a little bit more clear because these are a little bit too opaque for some of my beads, so one more pump of each of them. Now if I've left this too long, then I definitely can't reuse it. If it's starting to get all kind of thick in there, then I really want to not try and mix another pump of resin in because it's going to cause me some issues. That'll be right. Okay, so I'm just going to move this one over here for now and bring these in front of me. I don't really want to lean too much with what I'm doing. I might put a slight, I really like this colour, I'm a bit upset that we're nearly out of it, but I'm going to put a little bit of this. I can't use the same one. Try and put a bit of this into there, a bit more maybe than we had before. I'm just going to drop this whole toothpick in and see if I can get anything squeezed out the top. Oh, such a shame. very nice colour. Oh well, I might have to just drop a couple of toothpicks in until I can get enough colour going on with it. I try not to get the pigment on your hands, it just doesn't dry, it just goes everywhere. Which is again where your plastic and having maybe some paper towel close by can be super handy. Okay, now I have broken the golden rule here of not mixing in my clear container, but I do know this will be my last lot of clear anyway, so I'm not getting too upset about having done that. Okay, so you see just a light tint going on there. I can't get too much more, but that's okay. That's going to hopefully give it a little bit of a lovely contrast to the gold leaf bead I have going on this one here, and the purple feather and the wood bits just in there. And we'll try and mix some other colours in as we go as well. You can mix two colours and have them kind of converge in the middle and then give them a bit of a mix in the middle, and they can blend and give you some really cool effects doing those kinds of things. It's always worth giving those things a go, seeing how they go, because you get some really cool effects from all of that. If I ever figured out how to actually edit videos, this would be the bits that I would be speeding up for you. These closed moulds are quite tricky because you can't see how much is in them and how full they are very easily. Alright, now I want to give a bit of green in that. I quite like the contrast of greens and golds, and hopefully that will give some really cool kind of streaks going on through this one. The gold leaf does like to stick to the silicone or your mould release anyway, so you tend to get that kind of sitting around those edges, stuck to the sides. Might add a couple of drops of the green into the feather as well, and then fill the rest up with the clear. A couple of drops of this in with the feather too, just to give a bit of different effect going on. See what that does. And I'm definitely going to be putting this in with our wood. Yeah, that's nearly full, that one by the looks of it. Okay, I'm now going to just use up some of the rest of my resin by pouring it into these other bead moulds. So I'm going to go with a couple that are half and half, hopefully. Oops, no, that one's full. I guess that one's green. You've got to be careful when you're pouring directly out of the cup. Now if I really wanted to, I could actually wait for that to dry and then or nearly cure completely, and then pour another colour on top and actually get layered ones, which can be really cool to do. I'm hoping to get just a bit of a mixed kind of effect going on here. Whoopsies. Alrighty. So I didn't overfill that one, that was me just blocking over the whole surface with resin before the air could escape. And therefore it had nowhere for the air to go, and it just poured around the top instead. Now because it's silicone, that will just peel off, so that's useful, very, very useful. Yeah. Alrighty, and then maybe a bit of this one here again. Geez, I'm not learning from my mistakes very well. I think I'm trying to rush this because I'm conscious of how long I've spent talking to you. You can actually see on the top there how the metallic kind of moves through the non-metallic colours, which is what I'm hoping to get a bit of happening down the sides of these beads. Alrighty, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I'll deal with the rest of this resin and do something else with it, I guess. And hopefully I'll be able to add on what this looks like when it's done. Alrighty, bye-bye.